Good evening, friends, and welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. You know the drill. We are retired New York City police detectives and 9/11 World Trade Center first responders. If you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, you're in the right spot. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, so you'll get all things DutyRon and this guy, my partner in crime, Ed Wallace, when we go live or upload another video. Hey, for those of you who are new and you don't know it, Ed Wallace is a crime scene expert. He spent 20 plus years in the NYPD and has processed over 2,567 crime scenes. Ed, do I have that number right?
Yeah, it's about 2,700.
All right, 2,700 crime scenes in the New York City Police Department. He's a first grade detective, which is the highest grade of detectives that is out there. So I appreciate all you guys subscribing and hitting the like button. Tonight, we're going to get into Karen Read. The trial has entered day 17, if you can believe that. Seems like we've been at this for like 2 years already, Ed.
Oh my God, yeah.
A lot of things went on today. There was only 2 witnesses. There was a lot of sidebars and a bunch of arguments back and forth at the end, but it was a relatively short day, Ed. I was surprised by that.
Lifeguard Bev had to get to the Cape.
Lifeguard Bev had to get to the Cape, and not only that, she had to have her afternoon drink. So before we get started, I just want to say a quick shout out to Heather Rose in North Carolina. And Liz, Mom Liz, good to see you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining. I got a message from her before we went live, Ed. She says, I watch you and Ed at night, and during the day I watch Melanie Little. And I said, well, you're on the right track. Well, we started out with Melanie. We kind of like gave her the push off, and she's running with it. And she's live all day long covering the trial. She does a great job. So shout out to Melanie Little and everybody who's watching. Let's listen to a little piece, Ed, and then we'll come on and talk about what we got to talk about.
Tonight, 1 shoe tested. DNA from 5 people found, but who they belong to is a mystery.
With regard to the sneaker, at least, you couldn't even say whether John O'Keefe's DNA was on it, correct?
Correct.
What else a forensic scientist is revealing about physical evidence found at the scene and the chain of custody to get those items to the lab. Plus,
the government is not changing their timeline. The Commonwealth is not changing any information.
questions raised about an expert's timeline and a ruling about future witnesses. What the judge has decided as the trial completes its 4th week. Canton Confidential, the Karen Read murder trial, starts right now.
DNA evidence, it's a powerful tool for any criminal investigation, certainly when it comes time for trial. But what we know about the DNA collected from John O'Keefe's clothing leaves a lot of room for conjecture. Good evening. JC is off tonight. I'm Glenn Jones. Our John Maroney catches us up on today's testimony in the retrial of Karen Read.
My name is Andre Porto.
An analyst for state police says John O'Keefe's DNA was found at the snowy crime scene. Karen Read has pleaded not guilty to striking him with her SUV and leaving him to die in a blizzard.
I was assigned to do the DNA analysis process.
Andre Porto says the SUV's taillight tested positive for John O'Keefe's DNA, as well as 2 other unidentified people. The same, he said, is true for pieces of a broken drinking glass. Using a number with 30 zeros, he explained the odds of the DNA on the taillight belonging to Read's boyfriend.
The DNA profile from this item is at least 510 non-alien times more likely if it originated from John O'Keefe.
The defense challenged the results, asking if the glass had been tested for the DNA of the people it says are responsible for O'Keefe's death.
Were you ever asked with regard to that broken drinking glass to compare the DNA profile that you analyzed with the DNA of either Boston Police Sergeant Brian Albert or ATF agent Brian Higgins?
I was not.
A second analyst described how she reconstructed the SUV's busted taillight and examined debris from O'Keefe's clothing. Defense attorney David Yannetti questioned the chain of custody for evidence, suggesting something sinister while invoking the name of the former lead investigator and state trooper Michael Proctor.
You have no information and do not know why Michael Proctor waited 6 weeks to bring this clothing to your lab, do you?
Sustained. He had a piece of glass.
Jurors saw another docu-series clip with Reed talking about how she pulled a piece of glass from O'Keefe's face. Leaving court for the week, she declined all questions.
Thank you. Have a good morning.
Judge Beverly Cannoni has ruled on the use of accident reconstruction experts. She says she will not exclude a report from the prosecution as the defense had asked. At the same time, she says the prosecution will be given a chance to rebut some new information that the defense is trying to get in. In Dedham, John Maroney, back to you.
The evidence will further establish that John O'Keefe's shoe, the one that he was wearing when he was found, was sampled. And that DNA revealed 5, count them, 5 unidentified males. Recall that the evidence will establish independently that John was injured someplace warmer and had to be moved onto that lawn. 5 unidentified males touching that shoe.
Pretty powerful right there, Ed. Alan Jackson really making a high impact with that statement, in my opinion. I just wanted to get your thoughts before we dive into the cross-examination of both of the Commonwealth's witnesses. Massachusetts Crime Lab, Andre Porto. He is a forensic scientist too. He started out in September of 2019 on the job as a scientist 1. He described how they automatically get that promotion after 1 year to scientist 2 after they pass all their exams, and also a young lady by name of Ashley Valliere. I don't think I'm saying it right, but she's had 6 years, so she's also a rookie in our eyes, right? I think we called rookies until we hit our 10-year anniversary, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then they become veterans.
Exactly. So she had 6 years on the job. Bright colored hair and on the stand today. So those were the two. Ed, I just wanted to go to you for your thoughts as you are the forensic expert here.
Okay, so here are my takeaways from this. The prosecution has some gaping holes in their case, as we have already seen, but with the DNA as well, because Lifeguard Bev wouldn't allow DNA samples to be taken from Mr. Albert, Mr. Higgins, the chief of the Canton Police Department, and Detective Albert. She wouldn't let DNA samples get taken for elimination purposes. And now we have a mistake and I believe a mistake that was made by the Crim 2, who swabbed the remaining portion of the lens before the exterior of the lens before it was removed, the housing and everything was removed. She did a composite swab. Instead of taking 3 different swabs from 3 different locations on that remaining lens exterior, she did a composite swab, which came back with John O'Keefe's DNA and 2 unidentified males. Okay. Now, having no elimination DNA samples to compare to, such as in this case, they were looking to compare the chief and Detective Albert's from Canton PD DNA against those 2 unidentified male profiles. Okay, didn't happen. Huge mistake. Again, Lifeguard Bev wouldn't let the defense team get in order to get that DNA, but there are other ways to get that DNA legally. And in my opinion, defense teams usually have private investigators, and I would have, had a couple of them and, try to legally obtain their DNA. And there's ways of doing that without crossing any ethical or civil or constitutional right of these people. That said, next, you have this clothing. Now, the defense theory or defense hypothesis in this case is that, John O'Keefe went into the house, there was an attack, some kind of fight, and those injuries were sustained in there. And then later he would be brought out and placed in the front yard. Okay. So that is their hypothesis. And so now to find all this clothing that John was wearing that have multiple sets of male DNA and his, you would expect to find his on all his clothing. Okay. And they have no elimination DNA from Mr. Albert and Mr. Higgins to compare to that clothing and see if they can say, oh, well, this is theirs. Okay. Right. And we didn't have, not only that, they didn't take those unknown DNA samples and run it through CODIS.
Yeah, Ed, we talked about that today, you and I on the phone, and Ed and I are back and forth on the phone. It's just amazing because in any good investigation, I've got 20 years, Ed's got 20 plus years. We've been around some of the best, and we've been around and sat in many high profile death investigations. And when you have unknown DNA at a scene that, okay, they did have their suspect there, right? They already homed in on the girl, right? So they homed in on Karen Reed, but to eliminate, because you got a whole house full of people. Again, the Alberts, Brian, anybody that came across that scene, and Ed, you talked about this with me, everybody that was there at that party. You got to do you have to eliminate. It's got to be that process of elimination, but they never even tried it. They never even tried it.
And not only that, all of the alleged taillight lens that were recovered in the front yard of Mr. Albert's house, none of that was processed for fingerprints or DNA. None of those pieces, those 47 something pieces, whatever the case may be, none of it was processed for fingerprints or DNA. Why? Yeah. And you see the time frame, you heard it in the story there, how many weeks it took for that stuff to get into the laboratory, how many months. Okay. Really crazy stuff. So let's roll the tape, as they say.
You want to go with the first cross on the witness, on the state witness, Andre Porto?
Yeah, the DNA. Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
You found that there were 3 contributors of DNA to that taillight attached to the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Let's stop
there. Those contributors appeared to be.
Okay, so you heard our defense attorney saying you found 3 contributors to that DNA. Now, we'll never know if taking 3 separate swabs from the 3 different areas she took the composite swab, if we would have been able to obtain 3 single source DNA samples. One for John O'Keefe, which, by the way, that sample is meaningless because he has legal access to this vehicle, been in and out of this vehicle, touched this vehicle numerous times. So it's really not a big thing, nor is the hair sample that was recovered. And now we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that hair sample had a root on it. So they could have gotten nuclear DNA. And the Crim 2 here said, forensic scientist 2 said that he yielded no DNA genetic materials from that root. And then they sent that hair to the Bodie laboratory that I believe did mitochondrial and may have gotten a profile for Mrs. O'Keefe, the mom.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's continue.
Yes. David Yannetti, again, a brilliant defense attorney. He goes at this cross-examination today with extreme precision. And this is what I like about all of the attorneys that Karen Reed has employed. They are precise. They know what they're doing. They're well prepared, and they're ready for any kind of curveballs that are thrown at them or any which way this case takes them. And it's gone down quite a few rabbit holes, as we see in the completion of week 4. All right, let's let it roll.
John O'Keefe, is that fair to say?
He was included
All
in
right.
the profile.
With regard to the other two contributors, who were they?
They could be anybody.
Were you ever asked to compare DNA samples from either?
Did anybody notice, and this will be the last time I stop this, did anybody notice how defense attorney Yannetti paused for a long period of time to let it sink in to the jurors? And that was brilliant what he did there, because he didn't respond right away. And this guy was speaking really fast. As a matter of fact, he was told to slow down by Lifeguard Bev a few times, which was shocking, because the court reporter couldn't keep track of what he was saying. He was going too fast. But I thought it was really great that defense attorney Yannetti paused when he asked him who were the unknowns, who could they be? And we'll listen to it again and we'll continue on.
Were you ever asked to compare DNA samples from either Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert or Canton Police Chief Kenneth Berkowitz to the DNA profile that you analyzed from that passenger side taillight?
I was not.
Now, with regard to the broken drinking glass, which is item 3-2.1.1, do you see that in your report?
I do.
With regard to that, you came up with a DNA profile that also had 3 contributors, correct?
Correct.
One of those contributors appeared to be John O'Keefe, correct?
He was included, correct.
Who were the other 2 contributors?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
Were you ever asked with regard to that broken drinking glass to compare the DNA profile that you analyzed with the DNA of either Boston Police Sergeant Brian Albert or ATF agent Brian Higgins?
I was not.
Now, with regard to 7.1.2.1, or maybe it's 7-1.2.1, that's the stain A from the upper right leg of the jeans?
Correct.
All right. And you were aware, you were told that those were the jeans that John O'Keefe was wearing on the morning in question when he was found?
Based on the sample description, that's what it seems.
All right. And it turned out that his DNA was on his own jeans, correct?
He was included in the profile.
All right. And that was unsurprising to you, correct? And with regard to that item, you found that there were 3 contributors of DNA, correct?
Correct.
With John O'Keefe being one of them.
He was included in the profile, yes.
And who were the other 2?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
Let's move on to stain B, also from the upper right leg of the jeans. That is 7-1.3.1. You see that in your report?
I do.
When you found a DNA profile, how many contributors of DNA were there?
3 contributors.
All right. And again, this was John O'Keefe's jeans, correct?
Based on the description, yes.
So he was one of the 3 contributors.
He was included in the profile, yeah.
Who were the other 2?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
Moving on to stain C from the upper right leg of the jeans, 7-1.4.1. You see that in your report?
I do.
With regard to the DNA profile that you analyzed there, how many contributors of DNA were there to that profile?
At least 2, and it was interpreted as 2 contributors.
And again, this is the same pair of jeans that he was found in, correct?
Based on the description, yes.
And you said at least 2 contributors. It actually could have been more than 2.
Based on our protocols, I had to call it 2, and we determined it as 2, but it could be more than 2, yes.
Okay. Well, let's pay attention to the one that was not John O'Keefe, at least that one. Who contributed that DNA to his pants?
I don't know. It could be anybody.
Moving on to stain D, which is 7-1.5.1. And if I can just put my glasses on to make sure I've read my own writing correctly. Actually, is it 7-. 15-1, did I get that wrong the first time?
D?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean
Same D,
D?
same D.
Same D is 7-1.5.
Oh, I had it right the first time. Okay. With regard to that stain, you also got a DNA profile. And how many contributors were there to that DNA profile?
I interpret it as 3 contributors.
And again, this John O'Keefe's genes, correct?
Correct.
He was one of the contributors to his own genes, correct?
He was included in the profile.
And with regard to that stain on the upper right leg of his jeans, who contributed the DNA to who were the other 2 contributors of DNA to that stain?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
And then finally, with regard to that upper right leg of the jeans, there was also a stain E, correct?
Correct.
How many contributors did you find to that DNA profile?
2 contributors.
One of which was John O'Keefe to his own genes, correct?
He was included, yes.
And who was the other contributor to that stain on the jeans?
It could be anybody. I don't know.
And by the way, just for the record, that was 7.1.6.1?
7-1.6.
7-1.6.1. Thank you, sir. Okay, now, with regard to the unstained area of the exterior of the jeans, do you see item 7-1.7.1?
Yes.
You found a DNA profile with regard to that unstained area as well, correct?
Correct.
How many contributors of DNA were there to that unstained area of the jeans?
I interpreted it as 4 contributors.
And John O'Keefe was one of those, correct?
He was included in the profile.
His own genes?
Based on the description, yes.
Who were the other 3 contributors to that DNA profile?
I don't know. It could be anybody.
And before we move on to the sneaker, I just wanted to ask you a question about the passenger side taillight that I neglected to ask you. That was the one where there were 3 contributors, correct? And again, I'm going back to 3-1.1.
Correct.
Sorry to skip around, sir. I'm not trying.
Ed, we're going to take the questions from the audience after we're done with this. But yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about as it pertains to why aren't other comparisons made here and all of these unknown sets of DNA that they are talking about here. This is mind-boggling that nothing was done on this, and it just further proves how the Commonwealth and the investigators did the investigators did nothing, but the Commonwealth is sidestepping all the hard questions, and Judge Bev is helping them out by not allowing the defense to ask the pertinent questions.
Now, let me just bring this point up. Kerry and Karen did CPR on John while he was on the front lawn, but yet they didn't find any female DNA on his clothing.
All male.
Okay, all male. All right. And emergency responders, the EMS, EMTs, and they appear to be wearing gloves. Okay, but still, if you're going to do a thorough investigation and you have this stuff, and you might want to plug that hole in your case by getting exemplar DNA from EMS, and from the officers that were there, and also from the emergency room.
Yeah. It's just mind-boggling, but not surprising, because, again, this investigation was done half-assed from the get-go. From the moment that Lieutenant Gallagher got on the scene and going right straight through to the end till Karen Reed was collared. And it just seemed like they just shut everything down. Filing reports 100, 200, 300, and 400 and 500 days later by the state police. And looking at the shirt over 400 days later, doing the processing of the shirts, his hoodie pullover, the T-shirt, and all of the clothing evidence done over 400 days later. Why do you wait 400 days to process, to take it to the crime lab and have it processed? You can't tell me that the Massachusetts State Police in that region have that many backlogged homicide investigations, that, especially ones that involve an off-duty Boston police officer, that it took them over 400 days to analyze the shirt and his hoodie and the pullover hoodie. Bullshit. It's just bullshit. And it's so evident. It's so blatant that it's insulting.
Trying to make this more confusing than it is. With regard to the passenger side taillight and that DNA profile, are you able to determine when that DNA was deposited on the passenger side taillight that was attached to the vehicle?
No, I'm not.
Are you able to testify with any certainty that it was deposited there, say, on January 28th or 29th of 2022?
No, I can't.
So consistent with your analysis of it, are you able to say whether it occurred prior to January 28th of 2022?
No, I can't.
Were you aware that that vehicle was John O'Keefe's girlfriend's vehicle?
I was not.
Were you provided any information about just how often he had been in and around that vehicle prior to January 28th of 2022? So moving on to 7-3.1, which was the right instep of the sneaker, correct? You see that in your report?
Yep.
With regard to that particular stain, you noted how many contributors of DNA?
Yeah, it was interpreted as at least 5 contributors.
And when you have interpreted as at least 5 contributors, what does that do to your ability to find out who contributed that DNA?
So based on our protocols, we're not able to do any comparisons to any mixtures that are 5 or more contributors. So it's not suitable for comparisons.
Okay, which means that with regard to the sneaker, at least, you couldn't even say whether John O'Keefe's DNA was on it, correct?
Correct.
And with regard to all 5, do you have any idea who contributed the DNA to that sneaker?
No, I don't.
Now,
Another day of reasonable doubt for the jury.
moving on to...
Hold on a second. So, so on all of these clothing, with the multiple contributors, John being one of them, and then either 1 or 2 additional male contributors, they were looking for Mr. Albert or Mr. Higgins' DNA on that clothing. Again, not having a controlled DNA sample from them, there's no comparison that can be done to eliminate them as the source of those extra commingled DNA male profiles.
There you have it, Ed. Yes. All right. We'll let a little bit more of this play.
I just have a couple more for you, sir. Moving on to what is labeled as stain L, which is 7-18.14.1, I believe. Do you see that in your report?
I do.
And that was a stain on the back bottom of his long sleeve shirt, correct?
Correct.
And were you told that the long sleeve shirt was his outer clothing when he was found?
I don't believe so.
How many contributors to that stain on the back bottom of his long sleeve shirt did you find in that DNA profile?
I interpreted it as 2 contributors.
And did you make any match with regard to either of those contributors or both?
I did comparisons, and John O'Keefe was included as one of the contributors.
Okay, so John O'Keefe was a contributor of DNA to his own long sleeve shirt, correct?
Based on the descriptions, correct.
All right, and whose other DNA was on that shirt?
I don't know.
And then finally, with regard to 7-18.17.1, that was an unstained area of the exterior of that shirt, correct? That same long sleeve shirt.
Correct.
And you tested that and got a DNA profile, correct?
Correct.
How many contributors were there to that DNA profile?
I interpreted it as 2 contributors.
Was John O'Keefe one of them?
He was included as one of the contributors.
Okay, so his DNA was found on his own shirt, correct?
Based on the description, correct.
And who contributed the other DNA profile to John O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
I don't know.
with regard to any of the stains on the upper right leg of the jeans, I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you've discussed here today. Were you ever asked to compare the DNA profile with the DNA profiles of either Brian Higgins or Brian Albert?
I was not.
And your answer was you were not?
I was not.
That was an objection, by the way. We couldn't hear it well. She said, this was the one rare times that she said, I'll allow that. Like
Yeah, there was several objections we couldn't hear, and she sustained those.
Did anybody ever provide you with DNA profiles of Brian Higgins or Brian Albert?
Sustained.
I just have one more question for you, Mr. Porto, and I do want to thank you for answering all my questions here today. You wrote reports on your analysis of all the items and the work that you did on this case?
I did.
And you are directed pursuant to protocol to address those reports to somebody, correct?
Correct.
Who was it that you sent the reports to in this case?
I'm sustaining the objection.
Did you send those reports to Michael Proctor?
Sustain.
I mean, why would you sustain that? It's a matter of record. It's a matter of fact. He's sending the report to the lead investigator.
She's protecting. Oh, I can't have that, Ed. She is protecting the Commonwealth. It doesn't get any more blatant. I'm up and in your face, everybody here. This is Judge Bev, Lifeguard Bev.
Yes.
Right here, protecting the Commonwealth.
Oh.
They asked if he received communication from Michael Proctor.
No, he sent the DNA report to Michael Proctor. I mean, what is the harm in that?
It's so blatant.
Sustain. I'm sustaining the.
Are you correct?
Correct.
Who was it that you sent the reports to in this case?
I'm sustaining the.
Look, she's smiling.
Did you send those reports to Michael Proctor?
Sustain. Jurors, strike the question.
Bev, you earned this.
Pardon my French, but you're an asshole.
Oh. You better get that button on ready for the end, because boy, at the end I was livid.
That the ending button is that it gets this.
Oh, hell no.
Okay.
I have nothing further. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Mr. Porto, based on your training and experience in years of
So we want to answer a few questions. I see there was a lot of questions here in Ron, do you have any picked out?
I just want people to put hashtag Ed, hashtag DutyRon, or just one or the other or both, and put your questions in there. There were so many that went flying by. It's just hard for me to get to them all. I want to say a special thank you to this channel here, Luna Z Mom 24. Thank you for the 50. Very generous. And she's a great communicator. She said, finally caught you live. Can't thank you too enough for covering this. So many times she said, oh, I'm always catching the replay, but she's finally caught it live, and boom, comes in with a 50. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate you. Let's scan the chat and I'll go over the other super chats. I haven't forgotten them. So let's take a peek. Sleuthy Goosey is in the chat. Ed, as you know, she always has questions.
These articles of clothing and those pieces of the Taillight would have been great to use the MVAC on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And they would have probably gotten a lot better specificity and a lot of better quality DNA samples.
Here's one. Glam Suze says, hashtag Ed, could the J shape mark on the back of John O'Keefe, police officer John O'Keefe's skull, been from a gun butt? That we got that question last night as well.
It could be, but it could be any other a number of blunt force instruments, like a dumbbell or even the glass, the tumbler. The possibility of getting that.
Absolutely. Here's one for me. Hank's broken pencil. I love it. DutyRon, can someone get an Albert's? Can it get someone get Albert's DNA in a discarded item, they'd have to be investigating them. You can't just go around and grab discarded items.
Oh, that's not true. That's
but,
not true.
But Ed, is the defense.
Once you throw the item away in a garbage in a public location, you've lost all expectation of privacy. So someone could pick it up and then submit it and have to pay for the service and get the DNA profile.
Let's rephrase it. Let me rephrase the answer. Is it probable that somebody will go out and do that? No.
If you hired a private investigator, if you're the defense team, you could hire private investigators to go do that.
They should have did it 2 years ago. You know, not now while she's being tried for the second time. But yes, good question, Hanks.
It's not just stealing somebody's trash, as somebody said. You're smoking a cigarette butt and then you throw it on the sidewalk as you're in public. Okay, right. You have no expectation of privacy to that anymore. I could swoop in and bag that properly and get it off to a DNA lab to extract your DNA. You're drinking a cup of coffee, you throw it in a city garbage can on the corner. You have no expectation of privacy for that anymore.
We need you at Canton, Ed, and start doing some canvassing. Sleuthy Goosey says, hashtag Ed, is it normal to have 5 DNA profiles on your shoes? Another one is, would snow have any effect on any of these profiles? Great question.
Well, as you can see in this case, there were 5. It's not typically normal. People don't normally share their shoes or have other people touching their shoes. Maybe 1 or 2, like, you know, if you're one of those households that, you know, you don't allow people to walk in your house with shoes, and then you come in and, you know, you didn't put it in, you know, like you're having a house party and you have a whole lot of shoes, and then like the owner of the house comes over and then picks up your shoes and moves it to an area or something like that. And then, you know, at the end of your party, other people are looking through a pile of shoes to get their shoes. And so you may have contributors like that. And they were having a party. I don't know if they're the Albert house is one of those houses that, you know, force their guests to take off their shoes.
Yeah. Here's a question from Jenna on Point. Question: do you think the Commonwealth's theory is going to change the case dramatically? Or police officer John O'Keefe was not hit by a car and the science proves it?
I don't think it's going to change. I think they're pretty locked into the fact that they're going to say Officer John O'Keefe was hit by the car. But they're changing timelines. They're definitely doing that.
Lou Lane noticed that I told you in the beginning of the show while we were in the studio that somebody complained I was too loud, and now I lowered it. I just lowered it a little bit, and now Lou Lane and others are saying, can you turn your volume up? You're too low. I can't win, Ed. I turned it up a little bit. Hopefully that's better.
I got a question here. Hold on.
Okay, grab it.
So MLE asked Ed, was it the shoe that was in the ambulance at the hospital, or could it have been the shoe from the scene? You know, they never really clarified that to my satisfaction, at least in the cross-examination. But if anybody heard something else during the direct testimony when the prosecutors were asking the question as to the source of that shoe, I didn't get that information. So
here's one from Crispy Treat. She says, at DutyRon, the vials of blood has some kind of chemical in them so they don't clot. That would not be in the red Solo cup.
Right. You're talking about EDTA. All right. If you have, there's all different colored tops. For those of you who've ever gone to Quest Labs or any of the labs that have blood drawn, you know, they're all different colored, orange tops, purple tops. And each one of those tops is a symbol for what type of additive is inside the vacuutainer. Your purple tops have EDTA in it. It's a preservative and anticoagulant. But EDTA is naturally occurring in your blood. It's also in salad dressings and hot dogs and many of the foods that we eat. So you'll have some levels of EDTA in your natural blood, but if it's been drawn into a vial, a vacuutainer that contains EDTA, it's going to be obviously at higher concentrations.
Bingo. I'm going to catch up on some of these super chats. Melissa, thank you for becoming a member. Morel, thank you for becoming a member. SMB, thank you for becoming a member. Cujo's in the building, sending a bunch of flags. Thank you for being a member for 1 month. Thunderhorse, look at this. Again, gifting 5 memberships. Thank you, Thunderhorse. Much appreciated. Mr. Burt Wayne is here, everybody. $2 super chat. Thank you. What's on tap, everybody? Well, you know what time it is. The Mrs. M Star, thank you for the 10. I'm a hairdresser. This stood out to me today. DNA guy testified that police officer John O'Keefe's hair had a root on it. That indicates it was forcibly yanked out of his head. Hair that shreds on its own does not have a root. Ed, you're the expert.
Yeah, sometimes hair does fall out with the root. Okay, but it's
Typically not.
more often than not. You're right. It doesn't do that. Especially if you're fighting some kind of male baldness or whatever the case may be. Yeah, there was a root, and the analyst tested it and couldn't get any cellular material, and so he couldn't find a DNA profile on that root, and that's why they packaged up that hair and sent it to a private Bodie DNA lab.
My hair is growing back in, Ed. You see it's coming back?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you got a great imagination.
Stop breathing down my neck.
Mrs. M Star, thank you for the super chat. Ruth Christie sends in 5, watching from the UK. I'm so angry with this judge and Brennan.
Oh yeah, totally unethical.
They leave a lot to be desired. Jillian, thank you for the 199. She says, Ed, would the nephew's DNA class as unidentified male? Yeah.
Well, if the nephew was there, and which we do have evidence from his cousin, she said that he was there. She also said that John O'Keefe was there too, and that Colin, if that's the nephew you're referring to, had left before John was there. He could be a contributor, but we'd have to get, like I said, his elimination DNA and compare it. But the judge is not allowing the defense team to use him in this case.
Yes. Yep. We got notice of this recently. It was revealed that Proctor was not in the photo at the autopsy suite.
It was Trooper Watson and Trooper Keefe.
Right, Trooper Keefe and Trooper Watson. Again, they work in the same office. They're asking who is that and what was his role. It looked like he had a camera. So one of them had a camera, one didn't. And their role there is, to observe and take photographs. So
yeah, I'm not sure what office Trooper Watson worked in, but in his testimony, he said Keefe, that is Trooper Keefe, said he was the only one from his office that was there. So he was kind of splitting hairs.
Yeah. Mr. Wayne, thank you for the 2. Thank you for that, Ed. I bet 0 of those pieces test positive for blood. I'm not sure at what point the super chat came in or what he was referring to, but he says, I bet 0 of those pieces test positive for blood. Talk about maybe the taillight pieces.
Well, none of the broken taillights that were recovered by the CERT team or Proctor and found by the chief, none of those were tested for latent fingerprints or DNA. Wow. The only swab of the taillight was the one done by the female Crim 2 in the garage at Canton PD.
Right. Pierre, thank you for being a member for 28 months. You're the first YouTube channel I subscribe to. We are honored. That's so awesome. And thank you for that message. And thank you for being here and continuing to be here. All right, Ed, where do you want to go from here? Do you want to finish up with
No, let's jump ahead to I mean, there was a portion here where they talk about the chain of custody and so forth. But let's jump ahead to the young lady that put the lens back together. And I was very disappointed in the defense on their cross-examination of her. I think they missed a critical piece of forensic analysis that should have been performed and wasn't performed. And again, I keep saying it over and over again. When you have broken glass, broken plastic, and so forth, and you could look at the edges of the broken item, and then you'll see the direction the force was applied to break that item. So, was something on the outside of the lens pushing in and it cracked, or was somebody reaching in? For instance, like when Karen's car backed up into John's SUV, that force would be from the outside coming in to cause the initial crack and caused a couple of those pieces to be broken off, which Karen picked out and dropped to the ground in the driveway, which was never recovered. And then if somebody reached in with a tool or a hand and pulled outward, well, then the edges, at least maybe 2 sides or 3 sides of that broken piece would have an indication that the force was coming from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And they didn't do that analysis, and they weren't questioned about that and why they didn't do that analysis.
Ed, we've got Michael McWilliams. He's here saying Karen Reed is guilty as fuck. We respect your opinion. Come with something as to why you feel that. After looking at all the evidence and how these experts are coming on day after day with fumbled processes and how they processed all this evidence and what they didn't do with it and what they did do with it and all of the shenanigans in between, come up with something that makes some sense. And we'd love to hear what you have to say.
The medical examiner doesn't agree with you.
Yeah, correct. Correctamundo. We heard it from her just yesterday. Dr. Scortibello was clear and concise.
And even though she was being bullied to change that.
And Judge, Lifeguard Bev was there to save the day when she was being pressed on it. All right, let's listen. This is The Cross by Unetti of Ashley Valliere.
I'd like to first talk fairly briefly about your reconstruction of the taillight to which you've testified. At the outset, by the way, that was item 7-3.1. Am I correct?
Sorry, for which one?
That's the taillight, the 7-3.1. Am I correct?
3-1, I believe.
7-3-1?
The taillight is item 3-1.
Oh, 3-1. I'm so sorry. Okay. With regard to that particular item, your lab has different departments, correct?
I just want to stop this just for 1 second, Ed. So I want to highlight this. Where did it go? Damn it. The chat moves so quick that it goes by. Oh, here it is. So Julie says super chats equals most notable comments. True or false? We answer more non-super chat comments, the comments in the live chat, than super chats. So it's false. Everybody that's here that knows and that's supporting this channel knows that Ed and I answer the most comments that are non-super chat. We just read the super chat and answer them because the people actually sent the money to send that chat in. It's the right thing to do.
And we usually answer it at the end of the show. And when you go into the comment section after we post the video to YouTube, I'm always in there answering any and all of your questions for the most part. And
right.
Sometimes we have over 1,000 comments and I'm plugging away at it night and day, answering out questions.
Yes.
How many other content providers do that?
Not many. Anyways, so let's move along.
Criminalists who do different things, correct?
Yes.
You are aware that there are scientists within your lab who do DNA analysis, for instance, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And with regard to the order of processing items, is the DNA analysis done before or after you get the item?
It's usually before.
Okay. In this case, it was before. Am I correct?
I believe so.
Were you made aware that there were 3 contributors of DNA to that taillight, 3-1?
How long were you made aware of it?
No.
Once you reconstructed the taillight, you'll agree with me that it was missing a piece, correct? Or pieces?
There was an empty spot on the overall reconstruction, yes.
Were you ever provided with any pieces of taillight that would have filled in that missing spot?
No.
Were you ever provided or told about any pieces recovered from 1 Meadows Ave in Canton?
No.
were you ever told about a collision at One Meadows Ave in Canton? In any case, you'll agree with me, there was no glass in that taillight at all, correct?
Within the taillight, I classified them as apparent plastic pieces.
There's no glass.
Why does everybody answer so quickly? I think I've slowed this up. This is on. Damn. Both witnesses today talk quick.
As part of the taillight, correct?
I mean, it depends on what you call, like, the bulbs usually have glass as far as I'm aware.
Very, very thin glass, though, correct? Those bulbs?
Yes.
All right. Now, your lab received clothing in connection with this case. You've testified to that, correct?
I received the debris labeled as coming from the clothing. I never saw the clothing at all.
Right, but you're aware that your lab received clothing before the debris got to you, correct?
Yes.
And your understanding was that that was John O'Keefe's clothing in which he was found on January 29th of 2022, correct?
It's labeled as coming from him. I'm not sure of the date that it was found.
Okay. You understand the procedure of that goes on at your lab when it receives evidence?
Yes.
And you know that once clothing is brought to your lab, it's given evidence numbers, correct?
Yes.
And then one of your colleagues at the lab handled the clothing and or examined it, correct, before it came to you?
Yes.
And your understanding is that one of your colleagues retrieved debris from those items of clothing and then packaged it in a fold before it got to you, correct?
Yes.
You then open up the fold and you look at the debris, correct?
Yes.
You never saw that debris inside the clothing, correct?
Correct.
And the pieces of clothing that come in are given evidence numbers when your lab receives them, correct?
Yes.
For instance, the orange t-shirt was given or was named item number 7-17.
Yes.
And the gray long sleeve shirt was item 7-18, correct?
Yes.
And your lab is accredited, correct?
Yes.
There is a complete chain of custody from the moment the clothing was brought to the lab to when the debris was removed from the clothing, ultimately to when you're in court today handling the items, correct?
Yes, our in-lab chain of custody extends from when we receive it to when the submitting agent it is returned to the submitting agency.
Okay. And you have complete confidence that the chain of custody at your lab is effective at making sure that the evidence does not get lost or mixed up or contaminated, right?
I mean, chain of custody is meant to track where a piece of evidence is. The evidence unit also does inventories and audits to make sure that things are where they're supposed to be.
And you have confidence in your lab's chain of custody policies and procedures, correct?
Yes.
But you'll agree that your lab cannot control who handled the clothing before it arrived at your lab, correct?
Yes.
There are times in which crime scene technicians or criminalists from your lab actually participate in the search for evidence at a crime scene, do they not?
Some of the people at the lab are crime scene responders, yes.
There are times when they actually take custody of evidence. Again, I'm talking about people from your lab, professionals. They take custody right from the crime scene and transport that evidence to your lab, correct?
Yes.
In those circumstances, your lab would have a complete chain of custody from discovery to seizure to testing or whatever comparison you're doing until you release the items, correct?
Yes, but the electronic chain of custody doesn't start until that item is entered into our LIMS system at the lab.
Right, but when it's entered in, it would be entered in as having been seized by somebody from your lab, correct? In the hypothetical that I'm giving you.
Yeah, there's an evidence submission form that says that this crime scene responder submitted it to the laboratory.
There are other cases, however, when the evidence is brought to your lab by the police, correct?
Yes.
Local departments have access to your lab?
For evidence drop-off, yes.
The state police have access to your lab for evidence drop-off?
Yes.
And in this case, it was not a criminalist or other professional from your lab who seized the clothing and brought it to your lab, correct?
I'm not sure.
Do you have a record of that in your report in terms of who it was that brought the material to your lab?
I could look at the evidence submission form to see who.
With the court's permission?
Yes. All right, go ahead, Mr. Manning.
Having reviewed your reports, can you testify to the jury about who it was that brought this evidence into the lab?
So you can tell us.
Okay. So submission 7, all the items that are 7- was submitted by Trooper Michael Proctor.
Were you aware of the date of the incident that gave
Disgraced former fired trooper Michael Proctor.
rise to this case?
Yes.
And what was that date?
January 29th, 2022.
Were you aware that the clothing that you received was seized from the Good Samaritan Hospital that very day?
No.
What date was the clothing brought to your lab?
March 14th, 2022.
So that means that your chain of custody at the lab began on March 14th of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that was about 6 weeks after the date of the incident, January 29th of 2022?
Yes.
And of course, you can't speak to the chain of custody from January 29th to March 14th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
And you have no information and do not know why Michael Proctor waited 6 weeks to bring this clothing to your lab, do you?
Sustained.
Do you know where Michael Proctor stored this clothing during that 6 week period?
No.
Do you know how often he was alone with access to the clothing during that 6 week period?
Sustained.
Do you know if he had access to pieces of red or clear taillight during that 6 week period?
Sustained. Move on, Mr. Manning.
Unbelievable.
Okay.
He
Yep.
lets-
Lifeguard Bev to the rescue. You know, every time she says something like that, I keep thinking of Mighty Mouse. Here I come to save the day.
Trooper Bev, Trooper Michael Proctor being protected, disgraced former Massachusetts State Trooper Michael Proctor, who was fired for calling the defendant a cunt, for calling the defendant and wishing that she dies, that she hopes she kills herself, calling her all kinds of vile names. And this is what the Commonwealth and Judge Beverly Canone decides to protect with all of her sustained objections to the mention of his name. Shame on them. They should be ashamed of themselves. It's despicable. It's disgraceful. The things that Trooper Michael Proctor called Karen Reed, talking about her condition with her, having to go to the bathroom and that she has no ass and all of this craziness that he texts to his supervisor, Sergeant Buchanan.
And Lieutenant.
And the lieutenant and their lieutenant. And none of them were reprimanded properly. The lieutenant, we don't even know if he lost any time. But Trooper Sergeant Buchanan lost 5 vacation days. And he's still in charge of supervising the Norfolk County District Attorney Homicide Squad. How despicable is that?
Yes.
For the people of Massachusetts and the area that Norfolk County services, I would be worried for you. You should be writing letters, and this is disgraceful that these numbskulls, these scumbags, are still in charge.
For those of you who don't know, she spoke of the LIMS system.
Yeah, what is that?
LIMS is an acronym that stands for Laboratory Evidence Management System. All right, it's their chain of custody, and and once you intake it and it gets assigned a LIMS number or a lab number, it'll tell you where that item of evidence is actually at that time frame. So like it may come in and then it'll be put into a secure property clerk location and stored there until an analyst is assigned to conduct the analysis. Then that analyst will then have to go get it, sign it out in the LIM system, and they now add their name, date, and time that they have it, and where, so, and we know what lab they're in and what work they're going to be doing on it. And then when they're done with it, they package it all back up, put it back into the property clerk, enter into the LIMS that they completed their analysis. And then maybe the next analyst that's doing something different will then go in and get it and bring it in, and so forth and so on. It's their chain of custody.
Yeah. I want to go to the super chats, and then we'll go to the live chat, and we're going to take one brave soul that wants to call in and ask Ed and I a live question. I want at least one person to get brave enough to call in on a Friday night, because the show's going to end in about 15 or 20 minutes. So let's go right out of the box. Beth Barella sends in a $50 super chat. Thank you for that. I live in New Mexico. My son is an Albuquerque police officer. Nothing he dislikes more than bad cops. Well, tell your son to stay safe, and amen to that. Bad cops. Nobody likes bad cops, and especially the good, active, and retired cops. We don't like it. We call it out. It's despicable. So thank you, Beth. Alicia, thank you for becoming a new member. Ann Smith, thank you for becoming a member. KNS, thank you for your generosity. Ed, you checking the stock market? It looks like it.
The Hang Sing.
The Hang Sing. Angela Accardi, thank you for the 5. They all should be ordered to attend AA meetings. They all drink and drive, and it's just crazy. Thank you for becoming a member as well. Nicholas says that Ron and Ed, thank you for the 10. Thank you. We had a power outage during the broadcast. Katina, that's Katina's better half. I hope you guys are safe and that your power came back on.
Then you got to get a backup system.
Yeah, get a generator for Fuchs' sake.
Or battery.
Yeah, battery backup. You could get a power wall of some sort. They have power walls and different things. Beth, thank you for becoming a member. Bewitched. Is it true that water can destroy DNA? If so, how could they obtain DNA from the taillight and clothing that were covered in snow? I know, Ed, I know the answer.
Water in and of itself is not going to destroy DNA. However, if it's too acidic or too basic, it can destroy the DNA if it's left in contact. But it could also dilute it, right, depending on its contact. Now, you saw the video of the SUV inside of the garage at Canton PD, and the large chunks of snow that started off on the roof and then ran down the sides vertically. And once that dries, it's not really diluting anymore. But once it dries, if it didn't get lost in that, it should still be there. As in this case, we don't know when it was deposited. You never can say when it was deposited. Right. It could have been deposited after, by them touching surfaces in the interior of the car and then transferring to the outside of the car. You could see when they were working on that car, they had the hatchback up. So the interior of the back of the car was exposed. It was open.
Yep. Hey, Tron91 and many others have been saying in the chat, do you think the FBI is watching the trial?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Emily, thank you for gifting 5 memberships. We appreciate that so much. Lisa, thank you for the $3 super sticker. Texas RN says, do you think Polly Pocket, aka Bev, knows how wrong she is? I think she knows it, but she doesn't give a flying rat's ass. That's for sure.
Did we get to that part?
What?
Where Bev made her ruling? Do you have that?
No, we didn't get it. I have it.
All right.
LaFont, thank you for the 2. That's how they caught the Gilgo serial killer, discarded pizza. Yeah, that was he's talking about earlier on. Jem, thank you for the $9.99. DutyRon is my favorite law enforcement, and I know she met you too, Ed. Have you all seen the police / detectives behave so unethically at DutyRon and Ed Wallace? I have never, and neither has Ed. We've never seen anything like this in our entire active and retired careers. This is, believe it or not, this is shocking to us. Some might say, oh, how could you be shocked? This happens all the time. Not on this kind of grand scale of complete and total fuck ups. This, and I hate to use, foul language, but that's the best way to describe it. This is a total colossal fail.
Charlie Foxtrot.
Yeah, exactly. Schmitty sending her pocketbook at us, and she sends in a 10 and says, want to learn sign language? I'll interpret the oh hell no's, and pardon my French, but you're an asshole. DutyRon, give me a square. I'll interpret the whole thing. You'll earn viewers. Thank you for that. Maybe this is off topic, says Lefon. Thank you for the 10. Maybe this is off topic. The Karen Reed lawyers look and sound weak, pale, sick, and exhausted. I don't think so. They ain't got no quit. Haven't you heard? Almost like the Commonwealth keeps adding crap motions to add to the load to wear them out. Yeah, it's not working, I don't think. Brennan is so dirty, and Lifeguard Bev helps him so much. Yeah, she helps them by sustaining all of their objections.
From an outside observer looking in on the performance of Brennan, I have not seen many unethical attorneys at his level. He's really up there when it comes to being unethical, and he in my opinion, he's made several lies to the judge, to the court. Okay. In his arguments, and he's never been reprimanded for it, or he's never been punished for it.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll see it'll catch up. The long arm of the law will catch up to them, because they shouldn't be impervious to it. Decline, thank you for the 10. He or she says they found many different contributors for DNA in different spots on police officer John O'Keefe's clothing. Could transfer DNA from, say, the bar be one of them? I believe Karen is innocent, by the way. I'm curious.
Oh, I mean, there could be any number of sources. If you look at the footage inside that one particular bar, I mean, they have footage from all the locations they were in. If there was a lot of hand touching of other people's clothing, I mean, you could potentially transfer it.
Yeah. It could have been transferred in any different fashion, any different way. EV323, that's the mom of the history chick. Thank you for the 5. She says all Higgins and Albert need to do is volunteer their DNA to clear their names. Why don't they? Because they're not going to do it. They're dirty. Why didn't the homeowner at 34 Fairview, who was Brian Albert, why didn't he come outside? Why didn't he say, hey, come in my house and check to see if this murderer is still in my basement or still anywhere in the house? Why? Because he knew who did it.
Brian Higgins lawyered up. And when he was interviewed by the Mass State Police Proctor and Sergeant Urey, he was interviewed at his lawyer's office, and he dumped his own phone, but he only gave them the portion of the phone that had text messages between him and Jen and him and John O'Keefe. He didn't give them any information about who he was texting when he was in the parking lot of the Canton PD at 1:30 in the morning, or who he was calling in the parking lot as well. Because it was clear that when he first got out of his Jeep in the parking lot, he was texting. And then later on, when he went inside, came back out, he was making a phone call. So we don't know who he talked to or who he texted to. We don't have that information, and they never got it.
Yeah. And, something also that we mentioned hundreds of times, what's compelling to us as retired law enforcement while we were active and now still in our retirement, if a fallen NYPD or any officer from any of the jurisdictions across the Eastern Seaboard dies off duty, in the line of duty, off, in this case, off duty, you go to their funerals, and especially when it's from your own department. it speaks volumes that none of these people went to police officer John O'Keefe's funeral, including the ones who said that they loved him, like Jennifer McCabe and others. Why didn't any of these people show their faces at police officer John O'Keefe's funeral? It's clear and evident why they didn't. If they loved him so much and he was part of their crew and their buddy system, you would know, you could bet your bottom dollar that they'd be there. That speaks volumes in itself. Bewitching Bo, thank you so much for the 5. She says there would not be DNA from Albert and Higgins. Would there not be DNA from Albert and Higgins from hugging both of them at the bar, Ed?
If you see a video of them hugging, because they looked that night, they weren't too friendly with each other.
There was no hugging. Let me go down to the bottom because I think we're almost done with the super chats. Angela, thank you for the 5. Katie, thank you for the $2 super chat. She says thoughts on the NOLA escapes from jail. Not for this live stream. We try to stick to the topic, but yeah, that's a horrific. 11 inmates. They got one of them back. No excuse for it. I saw the pictures of the jail cell. I don't want to get into it and get off topic because if someone tunes in and sees our title and sees us talking about that, it's going to throw everything off kilt. So
also from the previous question, you talked about the shirt, but how do you explain the pants?
Right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, okay. All right.
Real tea with Krista Marie. Thank you for the 5. If you will allow it. Oh, I feel like I'm in court. I just have some things that I really want to say. Too much to text. I won't be long. Please, if you dare. LOL. I only have StreamYard.
Well, you can email us.
You can email us through DutyRon.com. So real tea with Krista Marie. Our ears are always open. We take all of our comments and we answer out all of our emails. It takes us longer to get to the emails than in the comment section, believe it or not. Suzanne, thank you for the 10. Love you too. Born in White Plains. Tony Buza from NYPD familiar. Family circa 1980. Oh.
Well, he was on around the same time I was, and my wife. Do you know where he worked? There was only 42,000 of us at that time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the super chat and thank you for that comment. Sheila, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Ed Wallace, hashtag Ed Wallace is also my favorite, but you all are the only ones.
Well, thank you, Jim.
One more from Texas RN. Can one of you please explain the time issue and Bev's ruling?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're going to get to that. Let's go to the regular chat and then we'll go to that last. I got the regular chat up now. So blast away with the regular chat.
Well, they never did say what type of DNA was present. On the clothing, right? Was it skin cells? Was it blood? Was it, they never did say what it was. Let's see.
I'm going to put you full screen while I look for the, that was at the end, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I got the full. Scan the chat, Ed, like a computer guru. All right. Where is it? Right here. It was pretty short, right? It wasn't long and drawn out.
No, it was at the end of the day, and Lifeguard Bev had to get to the Cape.
Yeah.
That why he looked at it, when he looked
Right.
I have to tell you those same cautions. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case.
Sure. Yeah.
If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, please disregard it and let us know. Be extra careful with your social media use. And also, I just want to remind you, next week, Thursday is a half day and Friday is a day off. All right, so we'll see you on Monday.
Thursday's a hot day and Friday we have a day off.
Yeah.
What did you say it was? A half day or a hot day? What did you say?
She said a half day.
Half day.
Friday we're off and Thursday's a half day.
Please get that state hooked on phonics.
That were.
There we go.
Why can't I get this right? Okay, there we go.
Stop breathing down my neck.
So before we recess, I appreciate the council provided me with the information. Mr. Leslie, I got the 2 reports that you had that were incorporated and what the Commonwealth had given me a few minutes before, but I appreciate that it was pointed out here. We've had full argument on this yesterday and today. My findings for the record are that the defendant has not persuaded me of undue surprise or unfair prejudice by this information, and I don't find that there's delayed disclosure. Of course, all of this is ample game for cross-examination, certainly as to what Mr. Burgess knew, what he looked at, why he looked at it, when he looked at it, why he changed his report, and violation of the sequestration order is all for cross-examination, and I will give you a lot of leeway with that, Mr.
Bullshit.
Not having a voir dire on that. Mr. Alessi, I can tell you, obviously, you've got a great facility for cross-examining on the underlying information here. You've done fulsome cross-examinations. I have every confidence you can do it here again. But if after the direct, you demonstrate that you need further time, I'll certainly hear you on that. And more importantly, perhaps, if you feel that the testimony of Jen McCabe and the others that you've mentioned is critical and that you need to recall them, I'll hear you on that as well. So regarding Dr. Welcher, as my understanding, the request yesterday was for, and it's been a request, I think, a few days. We've addressed it at sidebar, and I found that it wasn't the right time. Let's see how much Dr. Welcher.
Did she say sidebar?
Could go through. I understand Dr. Welcher will testify in the Commonwealth's case in chief.
The StreamYard link's in the chat, so whoever wants to join, the first one that joins will come on. You just got to be able to see the person, and your mic has got to be working. So
Next week or so, Mr. Brennan?
Hopefully next week, if not
All right.
the day after the holiday.
And that will be for all of the material that was provided to the defendant initially, right, by the Commonwealth's discovery deadline?
Correct.
And what you're asking for is that after ARCA testifies the new information, you're asking for rebuttal, right?
Yes, limited to the new information.
All right. So I would allow under these circumstances a limited rebuttal, and we can define this.
Why is it got to be limited?
The prosecutor wants a limited rebuttal to the defense ARCA experts. This is just so screwed up. Now, there's a retired judge up in that neck of the woods who's been doing editorials on this case about this judge's or lifeguard's performance, and she's just bashing her, Judge Bev here, Lifeguard Bev. And this issue came up. I know that in Melanie Little's show, she brought up that actual editorial, and I highly recommend you all find it and read it. It was on. She had it up today on this morning show. If you can go find it and look at it to see what this judge is saying about Lifeguard Bev here. And these are total appeal. What we call reversible error decisions that she's making. Okay. Here's the deal. There's their PhD expert reconstructionist wrote a report recently authored it on the 8th of May, but the defense didn't get it till the 11th of May. And in this report, they altered the timeline so that the crash reconstructionist timeline now syncs with Ian's testimony because it wasn't the same timeline. Okay. And that changed the way the defense could have cross-examined people like Jen McCabe. And
Right.
now they can't, they already cross-examined Jen McCabe, and it would look silly to bring her back for more testimony on this new timeline that they did. And again, they didn't get their hands on the timeline until May 11th that the change occurred. And then Brennan saying, "Oh, there was no change. There was no change," but he clearly writes in the paperwork that what he did and why he did it. Okay, and for Judge Bev to allow this late in the game this to occur without the ARCA experts now getting to look at this new timeline and then seeing how they can respond to it in a timely manner. To me, it just reeks of unfairness to the defendant.
Right.
The defendant is entitled to a fair trial. And I don't see this happening here now with this ruling. Next, in addition to that, Brennan wanted a chance to like recross Arthur based upon Arthur doing any work on what they just discovered.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, how many times are we going to keep going around this hamster wheel?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Then I go, then I can come back. And then I can come back. I mean, it's ridiculous. You got to cut this shit off.
Somebody said in the chat, when will this madness end? All right, we got two young ladies willing to join us, and I'm gonna do one at a time. But to be fair, L'Oreal, she joined first, the angel, so I'm gonna put her on first. Just keep the questions pertaining to what we're talking about here tonight, ladies. That's all I ask of you. You can ask us whatever you want. Let's just keep it on this topic, and I know that you guys are gonna do that. I just wanted to be in the open on that. Okay, welcome. Hi, L'Oreal.
Hey, I'm LauraLee. I've been a follower of the channel for a long time. I don't comment often, so thank you for having me on. I've got so many questions, but one of the ones, I guess I'm going to start with this. What kind of repercussions can be taken with the absolute farce of trial? Both of these have been, including the repercussions for the judge. I mean, I know that they can appeal, but God forbid Karen Reed doesn't get, she's not cleared of this. She could end up going to jail for something she didn't do. And it's so obvious. And it just seems like they're absolutely powerless with what's going on.
Yeah. I'm going to just say something quick. And then I know, Ed, you got a lot to say about this response. Obviously, we know that, the jury is the fact finders. And the jury that was in trial 1 is not the same jury that we have here in trial 2. Okay. I'm hoping that it's true that these are younger jurors, and I think that I trust listening to Melanie Little talk and a lot of people who are covering this thing from gavel to gavel, 7-8 hours a day. This new Karen Reed 2.0, this new jury are younger, are younger than the previous. And I think that they're paying closer attention to the details. And as we put out and laid out here 7-8 days in a row, we've been live with this since I think the only time we took a break was on Saturday last week. So for 7-8 days in a row, we've been talking about this. And the bottom line is that every single day there's reasonable doubt being brought up. So I think that we will see the right verdict here of not guilty in this second go around. But in the case that we don't, there's also the appeal process. But as far as Judge Bev goes, Ed, you could talk about that. I mean, well,
as I understand it, Judge Bev has been receiving a lot of ethics complaints to the judiciary that oversees her work. Right. So they're going to have to take those seriously and investigate each and every one of those complaints and, see if there's any validation to them. And then if there is validation and they come to a finding, then she can be disciplined. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with the law enforcement agencies. I know Canton PD had a quote unquote audit, but what I really think should happen is the governor's office through maybe the state attorney general should conduct some oversight on the performance of the state police and the Canton police in their involvement and as to why they didn't follow appropriate protocols for this investigation. And they should be made to answer out for all of this negligence and incompetency.
Yeah, because how many other people have they done this to? It's just because I'm in Canada and been following this very closely. But where I'm going with this is they've been caught because the whole world is watching. How many people have they done this to?
Well, that's another thing, too, because now once you have these types of complaints, the defense attorneys that worked on cases that have already been adjudicated that involve these troopers and these officers will now take a second look at their cases, especially if there was a conviction. And then maybe if they see something egregious or now understand that there's something they could go back and petition the court to possibly overturn a conviction or reopen the case or get a second trial, or any one of these things are on the table now. I thank you for your question.
Thank you for
Thank
being great guys, sharing your time and your knowledge with all of us. I really deeply appreciate both of you.
We
All
thank
right. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, we
Thanks.
thank you for coming up.
Okay.
See you soon. Bye. All right. Krista Marie, she dared us. She dared us. She says, if you dare to take my question. Hey, Krista, as soon as you give us the thumbs up, I'll add you in. Okay, here we go.
I do it all day long.
She gave us 2 thumbs up. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
All right. Where are you from?
I love you. I'm in New Jersey. I'm right below you guys.
All right. What part?
So she's also, wait, before she tells us where she is, don't give us the city and state, but
That's River Township. Everybody knows. Tom's River Township.
so she's the host. Whose
I'm
side-
south of you.
Yeah. Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Oh,
part time. I live in Staten Island, but then I'm part time in Stafford.
Jersey. Yeah, Jersey. Exactly. No, I watch you guys every day. Today's the first day I didn't watch the trial because I had to do my own thing. But basically, LauraLee is my 2 questions because I'm confused on is the DA is the one who makes the decision to recharge Karen, the DA Morrissey guy?
Yes, the DA has the discretion whether or not to proceed forward with the second trial. So he could have said, no, I'm not going to do it in the interest of justice, but he pushed straight ahead and went right for the 3 charges again and retried her.
And they knew that the feds had already, and he knew the feds had already been looking at the case, correct or no?
Oh, he knows the feds have been looking at the case. Yeah.
Before trial 2 started or before trial 2?
Yes.
Why would he do that though? Then how could you I feel like they're embarrassing themselves daily because this was not an investigation.
The feds actually approached his office and told him he should rethink prosecuting this case.
Okay. Well, I'm glad they did. I'm glad that he did it. And I'm glad they didn't listen because I feel like a lot of stuff has to still come out. I feel like, unfortunately, this trial was for a lot more things to be revealed and more people to be held accountable because if, like LauraLee said, how many times they could do it this easily to another police officer? How many other times have they done this? And how come there's so many corrupt people? It's hard to even believe. I know. Oh, I thought she was guilty too, because who would believe all of this?
Yeah.
This is
and Krista, put aside a police officer.
Yeah.
It could be you, me, anybody. It could be our kids.
Our son, your
yeah, I have 2 adult boys, This could be anybody that just happened to be walking through Canton or going there on a vacation or just passing through.
Sandra Birchman.
Yeah,
I heard that, and then you know what? I found out yesterday. I didn't know he was unalive. I didn't know he was still unalive when they got there. That really got me upset because I know for sure they left him for dead. I'm going to say allegedly, whatever. Listen, the circumstantial evidence that they used against Karen is nothing compared to what they have against the other people. That circumstantial evidence is against the other people, but they decided not to look at it, and now we see it, and we're all supposed to sit back and go, it's okay to prosecute somebody when you're telling us not to believe our own damn eyes. I believe what I see.
Well, the prosecutor is an elected official, and so the people of that county,
county,
they need to have their voices heard and get up, and the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You need to tell them this is not acceptable. We want changes.
So can they have town halls for the judge? What can they do to?
They've had numerous town hall meetings. You can see them online, man. The fireworks go crazy in these town hall meetings over this case.
Good, because I felt like last time they didn't care. The people were uninformed. And I feel like this time around, this Judgy Cat's trying to get her mouth open. She's not allowed to talk though. People this time around, like I honestly would have never stopped. I would have never watched this. I watched one day and I'm like, the people in the house did it. Come on, man. Mm-hmm. Like somebody told me 2 seconds, 2 minutes. And I was like, are you kidding me? I don't know these people, but whoever was in that house obviously did it.
Yeah, Krista, there was many real red flags that stood out to us, and we could just go over them quickly here. Yeah. And this is not an entire list of red flags, but first and foremost, the chief of detectives of the Canton Police Department lives straight across the street. Yeah. He and Ed and I worked in the detective bureau in the largest police department in the United States, in the NYPD. If the chief of detectives lived across the street and a dead New York City cop showed up on its neighbor's front lawn, you could bet your fucking bottom dollar that chief of detectives would be out in his bathrobe and be saying, hey, I want my A team here. I want this scene secured. I don't want anybody in or out. I want everybody interviewed on this block. Every house, I want it knocked on the door. I want interviews. I want a canvas of all of the video from every inch of that block, because you can't tell me that the Arlo camera across the street at the chief of detectives' house, we heard Lieutenant Gallagher say, when I'm playing little bitch boy for him and go getting his mail and picking up packages for him, I know that camera doesn't cover the street. Really, guys?
Really?
So right from the onset, from the initial response, Lieutenant Gallagher shows up there, goes to the chief of detectives, and he gives him 6 Solo cups, a Stop and Shop bag, and he goes and sends the sergeant back to get a leaf blower so he can blow snow around where there's evidence. I mean, so that is the start of this debacle, and it just continues from there with the Massachusetts State Police, with Michael Proctor coming on the scene, who's friends with Kevin Albert, friends with Brian Albert. He knows them, and he got on the stand first trial, and said, "I have no connections to them." Now it's all of a sudden he's asking this one to babysit his kids, and he's doing this, and this one's doing that. Everybody's intertwined here, and they're all.
It's so hard to believe. It's so unbelievable, and nobody would believe it unless they watch this, and that's why. But the people that say Karen Reed's guilty, please stop saying it unless you have facts, because you say that and you say nothing else. I see it all day long. We're coming up here. We're spending hours talking about this. We're upset. We're laying out facts. We see what we see with our own eyes. From the jump, from that murderous 911 call, that murderous wench said there's a man passed out in the snow. He was dead. He's an officer, and he was your friend. And you said nothing to get that. Oh, nobody's coming to help him. What in the world? How are these people sleeping at night?
There's so many things that occurred in this case that are unreasonable. There's no common sense. It doesn't make any reason why these things happened or occurred. All right.
Have you ever seen this before? Have you ever seen
this?
No,
not to this extent. No.
And Ed, the day that they were doing that leaf blower thing, I was with you. That day. I'm like, I get it.
Krista, to put the icing on the cake, the chief of detectives was a lieutenant at the time in 2022 when police officer John O'Keefe was murdered on the front lawn of inside 34 Fairview. He's now a deputy chief. The guy got elevated through the ranks from lieutenant to captain to deputy inspector to deputy chief. He's now a deputy chief, making probably about $500,000.
I heard what they get paid there. Let me ask you another question. Do you think that those officers chose Gallagher and certain people because they knew that they would? Because Gallagher seems like a guy who would believe. He's an older guy. He's probably been around a long time. He probably believes everything's done the right way. Do you think they chose these people to do these things because they would be dumb? I don't want to say it that way. You know
I don't know about that, but
I'm going to answer for a second, Ed. I'm sorry.
Yeah. How could they?
It's a small police department with under 30, 35 cops total, with that, the whole department. So it's a teeny department. So we don't know. I mean, we would just merely speculating that they sent them to do this. But at the end of the day, we're getting off track.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you, Krista Marie. Thank you for joining us. And we'll talk to you soon.
I will see you soon.
All right.
See you down the shore.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to show you this before we move on.
Okay, let's do it.
I don't know if you could read that by my finger. EDTA. Everybody see it by my finger? EDTA.
Oh yeah, I do see it. Yep.
Okay, so it's in our food. We eat it, so it does get into our blood. So anyhow.
Yeah. We promised two people to come on. There's actually 2 more people in the waiting room. I want to kind of wrap this up because we're going to an hour and 30. Well, let's just bring in KP Kander. We'll take one question and we'll try to make it quick. Hi, KP. Where are you watching from?
Hi, I'm watching from Lebanon, New Hampshire. I'm originally from Cape Cod, which is why my handle is KP Cotter.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that was a license plate on my motorcycle, my Harley. So I have 2 issues. So in the opening statements, Jackson brought up that he said kind of like a shh, he's a Boston cop. Nothing's going to happen to him.
That was a
So
text.
therefore, well, no.
Ed, what were you going to say, Ed?
That's found in a text message between the investigating officers.
Right, back and forth.
Absolutely, but Jackson said it in his opening statement.
Right.
So therefore, that opens the door, and somebody has to bring in Michael Proctor in order to introduce those text messages, right?
Well, yeah, unless there's I believe the defense is going to call Proctor if Lifeguard Bev doesn't preclude that.
Yeah, yeah. What's the
right? And then the other question I had was, you know, they did a whole lot of work on this whole like DNA thing, but nobody ever said or questioned, and I'm curious why defense didn't bring this up, is like, did you ever take samples from the other 2 DNAs or 3 DNA? I get why they didn't do the 5, because their protocol won't allow them to do that. But why not send those 5 to the FBI, have them do it, because they have much better equipment, right?
I'm not sure about that, but the forensic protocol, the standard is typically if you have a 5 person mixed sample like that you don't conduct analysis on that.
Oh no, I get that.
But the FBI can't do anything more than what they did in the state lab. They're not going to be able to separate the samples.
It's the same science, whether the FBI does it or the state does it. That's what you're saying, right?
So have we determined that all of the samples in, like, let's say the 3 blood stains, well, the blood, I'm not going to say the 3,
right.
The blood stain that has 3 DNA samples, has anybody determined that they were 3, like the blood stain had to have been from John O'Keefe?
Well,
right?
we're not sure they're blood stains, these DNA samples. Okay. But some of it may be blood, but in the mixture of 3, there are 3 profiles. They've identified John as being a contributor to the mixture. Have they had exemplar profiles of the other suspects in the defense's case? They could have compared those two to the 2 additional profiles to see if they were could be eliminated or couldn't be eliminated as the source of those profiles. And they didn't have the exemplars to compare it to.
But if Higgins and Urey had their DNA taken, well, their blood drawn for DNA,
right?
How come none of that was compared?
Higgins didn't have any blood drawn. Urey, I believe Urey and Proctor gave up DNA.
Oh, maybe it was Proctor.
Yeah.
Urey
But still, nobody said in the testimony that was given whether Urey or Proctor were eliminated as the source of those samples.
Right.
Because
exactly.
as you see, when he testified, he said, well, whose are they? Well, they could be anybody's.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
And that, I guess that's my question. My daughter just graduated from PSU with a Bachelor of Arts in Criminology, and she so wanted to be a police officer. And she's been watching this trial, and she's like, I don't want to be a cop anymore.
Oh,
I can't do that. And
no,
I'm like,
that's wrong. That's wrong. And that's why I hate things like this, because
I know, and it makes me
the
so
trust
sad.
of the people. And we need good officers. We need good people to come into the job.
Yeah, you don't want them to be discouraged by these bad apples. And I hate to say and use that term. So, again, when you see stuff like this, that should give you more, vigor to want to get on there and do it the right way and be that good male or female detective.
She can't, because all of a sudden the public is looking at the police and they're saying,
Yeah.
and we don't even live in Mass anymore. We live in New Hampshire.
Right.
Okay.
I don't buy into the entire public looks at the police this way, because we all have to realize that, this is not indicative of what.
No, it's not.
just
at
a little-
all.
if you go just a little bit south to the NYPD, this doesn't happen there. You never see this happening there. Anyways, we got to wrap it up because we've been at this almost 2 hours. We
You
appreciate
don't see this in Bristol County. You don't see it in Plymouth County.
we
Not
appreciate
the way you see it in Norfolk.
we appreciate you coming on and asking the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye now.
I truly appreciate you.
Yes,
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome. Bye. All right, Ed, we're going to wrap it up. I want to say again, this is all about John O'Keefe, police officer John O'Keefe. And that's what we want to keep the focus on John O'Keefe, his family, and getting justice. Justice not only for him, but also for Karen Reed as well. I mean, we feel strongly that she was railroaded here. And that's the best way I could put it. She was railroaded by the Commonwealth. And not only was she railroaded once, but she was railroaded twice. And that, to me, just amplifies this, because one of our call-ins was saying to us, how and why did the prosecutor, the Commonwealth, why did they even see, after going through the first trial and going through everything that they went through, why did they have the audacity to retry her again? It's just unbelievable.
I just want to just add one thing about the hair and fiber found on the car. Folks, you need to go look at the photograph of the hair and fiber on the car and see which came first, the salt stains and the water stains or the hair. Because if you see it, the hair is on top of the water stains. So the water stains were on the metal first, and then the hair came second. Take a good look at that. All right. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Amor. Great super chat. Great message there. Thank you for the 10. We appreciate you. Harry, thank you for the super sticker. And OG, thank you for the $5 super chat. I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts. I can tell you there's a lot of this BS in the PDs in the state. You hate to hear it, but you know, it's coming straight from someone who lives there. Catherine, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. All right. I want to play this and then we'll go out. Ed, I know you always have something to say at the end of these things, so I'm going to give you last word.
All right, folks, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your time with us. I know you can get your true crime fix anywhere you like on the internet, and it's an honor to have you here with us. And I appreciate you. Always, folks, stay safe, stay prepared, and watch your six.
Stand by, folks, for a message. Just want to play this for you to keep it in perspective.
Case, the Braintree native was a Boston police officer who became the legal guardian of his niece and nephew after the children lost both of their parents to illness. You're watching Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
Good night, folks, and thank you for watching.